Welcome to the Health from the Source podcast, where we're dedicated to educating people about health, ancestral nose-to-tail nutrition, regenerative agriculture, and the interplay between environment, health, and sustainability. All right, well, this is our final episode of our series here. And so on this episode, I'm going to be chatting with Chris. We're going to talk a little bit more about the environmental impact, our food choices, how we look at things from a regenerative agriculture perspective, and maybe dive into a few other little concepts we haven't talked about yet, as we've already gone through regenerative agriculture, and then just close with some thoughts and things for us as a business of where we want to go and things that we're going to be moving to in the future to share with you, our community. So Chris, why don't you take us off and we can talk a little bit more about how our consumer purchases and the way that we buy things really plays into our environmental impact.
That's a topic that I'm really very passionate about, is to understand that in the commercial world, all of our purchases have a direct link back to the company to which you've bought that product from, and what that company actually does within its own production systems and supply chains from there. So there's a lot of promotion by companies that have gone into, espousing how that they do good and that they, support the environment or support the farmers or so forth. It's really, I think, incumbent on every consumer is to dig a little deeper and to really find out, when they talk about doing good, is that across their entire supply chain, or is it just 5% that they like to spruik and then the other 95% doesn't have really an ethical or environmental focus on their supply chain?
Yeah.
So
this is the really whole greenwashing thing, like you talked about previously, right? There's so much of that in the industry and in the markets now.
Yeah, and it's a lot of lying by omission. So we'll tell you all the good stuff that we do. We're just going to be completely silent about the bad stuff that we do as well. So it's really tough for consumers to actually understand the impact that their purchases have. And this is not just in the food system, it's across fast fashion, energy supplies, it's across the broad spectrum, which can be really daunting for anyone to actually sit there and go, how on earth do I actually find out where my hard-earned dollars are going? And quite often, I get feedback, it's like, it's all too hard. You know what?
Yeah.
I can't do it. And I see that as the first step to the whole community walking away from the challenges that we have in front of us. We need to know. We need to actually understand. And that's where Provenir and Vital Origin spend so much time being open about our supply chain, being transparent about our processes, talking about things that quite often people sort of go, I don't really want to know. But when you do know, you do better. And so I think one of the things that, you can see I'm getting all worked up, that I just really am passionate about people understanding where their dollar's going. And when you think about how much of your weekly paycheck goes towards food, it's a really significant portion of the daily spend. And every one of those dollars can go to organizations that are doing the right thing across the supply chain. So, don't be demoralized, chip away at it. Find one fashion brand that you like because, it's, it does responsible sourcing as well. Same with food. It's worth the effort. And then, that you're actually being part of the solution, not part of the problem.
Yeah. Consumers will always drive the market and make decisions with their wallet, right? I think we've said that previously, and it's definitely the way to start to move things in the right direction. And I think we're getting there, but we definitely need to pursue more. And that's where that transparency component comes in, which is why, we've shared so much of the whole journey here across this whole series. And, sometimes we share things that maybe, as you said, people don't really want to know, or maybe, they shy away from knowing some of these things. But the more you know, the more you can make an informed decision, which is why we're both really passionate about making sure we share this with our audience, with our community. People know where things are coming from. They can support the farmers. You know exactly where everything is and where your food actually comes from. And that's what's going to move the needle more. And if people start making more of those choices, then hopefully that starts to move the rest of the industry to a way where maybe we get some more transparency. I might be over hopeful in that I know other industries maybe don't necessarily want too much transparency, but I think the more that we have that, the more we'll move in the right direction, because education and information is always what eventually moves us in the right direction.
Yeah, we need a campaign called Cut the Bullshit.
Yeah. Yeah, honestly, just a no bullshit campaign, just straightforward. I think one of the difficulties for a lot of people around thinking about sustainability and where animal-based food ties into this is the aspect of harm and death, right? And so people initially, and this is where I can relate with people, right? They don't necessarily want an animal to die because of them. The way that I look at this and I perceive this, and many other people do, and you can look at it from a scientific perspective, is what is the thing that does the least harm to the environment, the entire environment and the ecosystem of our planet, right? Is it one animal not dying that is more beneficial to our entire planet? Or is it now that you're creating an entire industrialized process with fake foods that need to be shipped around the world, with a factory facility running on fossil fuels, with all of these things now that actually have a higher carbon footprint than what one animal would have had? And traditionally, as pastoralists and as we started to have agriculture and to bring in animals, that was the best system and the most economical and sustainable system, because we worked with nature. And so the way I perceive it is from a point of least harm, but ultimate least harm, not least harm of the one animal, the least harm to the entire ecosystem of planet Earth. And my perspective, and I imagine your perspective is the same, is regenerative agriculture is not only the thing that does the least harm, but it actually heals and recuperates the ecosystems and supports the ecosystems. So I think people need to move beyond the very narrow-minded view of, yeah, but an animal died. You need to think, okay, well, if you're going to not eat that and you're going to eat a bunch of processed food based on monocrop agriculture, sprayed with a bunch of, stuff, pesticides, herbicides, what goes into producing all of those? What kind of manufacturing process goes into making those? How do they get shipped around the world to all the farms? Then those soybeans and grains have to go to another facility where they get milled and ground and then produced into some other food, which also runs on fossil fuels. And then that needs to be shipped across the world, all throughout to random stores on shelves where it needs to be stored. Like, you have to think about those further order processes. And is that really better for the planet? And I don't think so. What are your thoughts?
There's that goes down the alternate path. If we're not going to eat animals, then we're going to eat vegetables and plant-based foods. And there seems to be this continual pursuit of vegetarians and vegans, and I'm not having a shot at them, but they're always trying to replicate meat-based products,
Of course,
like a plant-based hamburger or a plant-based corn dog or whatever it is from there.
which is
Um,
ironic.
correct. So that's, weighing up the production systems of a plant-based processed food versus an animal-based non-processed food, so harvested and butchered and cut but doesn't undergo further processing. um, the the way that I look at it, and it's possibly because I see this through the eyes of being a farmer, is every ecosystem has plants that are eaten by herbivores, and herbivores are eaten by carnivores. There's a very well documented land-based structure of how ecosystems exist. And if there are not predators to eat the herbivores, the system falls over. And so, we've developed to a stage that, we don't hunt and gather our the herbivores. We grow them, we care for them, we provide them with a fabulous life, and then we have a very quick and humane processing of it. But if there isn't a predator, then you either get overstocking of the herbivores, and then the plant ecosystem crashes out, or you end up with disease and the herbivores all start to break down. So there's a balance, which is what we call nature, of this process happening. Now, what we actually need the most is plant growth. So one of the most rapid growing plants in the world is grass. But grass will grow to a certain height and then become dormant. So to accelerate that grass growth, because grass goes through photosynthesis pulls carbon dioxide out of the air, turns it into the cellulose that exists within the plant. So that way, the excess carbon that is in the atmosphere can be drawn down into the ground. We need that grass to grow as fast as it can. It can only grow as fast as the herbivores will actually eat it and process it through. So that's sort of very simplistically that the basis of regenerative farming is actually having really highly dynamic plant growth and ruminant growth production systems, which is actually drawing carbon from the atmosphere into the soil through a process called carbon sequestration, which is a great tongue twister. And that's what we need. So, by consuming ethically grown, regeneratively farmed ruminants, we're actually directly helping the environmental management of land to sequester carbons and start addressing the overload of carbon that we have in the atmosphere. So it's this sort of beautiful circle that if we get it rolling in the right direction, it's a triple win.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to get into the carbon aspect a bit more because you know quite a bit about the carbon cycles. But one stark thing that I always like to bring up when we talk about that balance between herbivores, carnivores, those types of things is the aspect of keystone species. So for people who are not familiar, keystone species are key species in an ecosystem, in an environment where if there's a change or a shift in that species, it drastically affects that environment to the point of potential collapse. One of the biggest ones, or the most well-known aspects of this, was the reintroduction of wolves in Yellowstone. And so a
Yeah.
lot of them had been hunted and killed and just sort of moved out. And what happened is the deer and everything else just took over and decimated a lot of the land. They were eating all the grass, all the foliage, everything else, which was having a huge impact on the ecosystem there. All they did was reintroduce this keystone species, being the wolves, which kill a lot of those animals for food, and it completely corrected the issue. So it is all about balance, and I'll put it in the show notes. There's some great reviews of this whole thing. It was a well done study, actually. They researched the whole aspect of reintroducing the wolves, and so it's a great example of how we need this balance in nature. And I've said it before, and I'll keep saying it. I think moving away from nature and trying to dominate it through technology and science, I think, is the wrong thing when we can probably find synergy and balance in working with it. And regenerative agriculture is obviously the main thing that we have at the moment of doing that.
And, if we move to the extreme idea of the planet becoming vegan, that would have massive environmental consequences with our land management.
Well,
Not
they
to
would also
mention,
just have to potentially kill a lot of animals. Like, this is the funny thing with PETA, right? There's been a lot of examples with PETA trying to shut down certain things or farms or something of that nature. And not only them, there's been a few other examples. There's the issue now, I think, in Germany with the Dutch farmers or something, where now there's going to be all these animals around, that can't go towards anything, and so they're just going to have to slaughter them because there's going to be too many. So now they're
Anyway,
just going to aimlessly kill animals for no purpose other than to manage their the amount of them, the volume of these animals, because they're going to keep growing, they're going to have more babies, and so what do? We just kill them and do nothing with it. It seems quite counterintuitive to go down that path.
yeah, and so I think there's a natural balance of everything that we keep on sort of coming back to, and that cattle, sheep, ruminants are an absolute key aspect of maintaining nature's balance.
Yep, absolutely. And so let's dive into that carbon cycle because it's really interesting. There's a whole thing of cow farts and burps are the cause of global warming and the
Correct.
rising of CO2 in the atmosphere, which, when you understand the carbon cycle and you understand how nature works, you got to just laugh and shake your head. But why don't you tell us a bit about that? And I'll actually share a bit from Sacred Cow. They've done a really nice infographic, which I'll put in the show notes as well. But yeah, tell us a little bit about the carbon cycle and some of the nuance when we're looking at that.
Yeah, so there's a number of cycles that occur on the planet. So the planet is a closed circuit. So sunlight gets in, and heat radiates out, but besides that, nothing gets in and out of there. We don't lose moisture, we don't gain moisture, we don't gain carbon, we don't lose carbon. There is a finite amount of carbon and moisture in the world. So when we look at moisture, which is another interesting one, it's either as a gas, a liquid, or a solid. So when we get to periods of when most of it ends up as a solid, that's what we call an ice age. So the other thing that we've got at the moment is we're getting most of water as liquids. So we're getting rising sea levels from there. It's not that we've got more water, it's just changing the state that it's in. And it's similar for the carbon cycle as well. So carbon either comes in the cycle that we're talking about as carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, methane, or cellulose, which is when it's bound into the cell wall of plants. So the cycle pretty much goes through the process of photosynthesis. Carbon dioxide that is in the atmosphere gets incorporated into the grass and the roots of the grass. Herbivores come along, they'll eat the grass, they will process the grass through their ruminant stomach, they'll burp out methane, and they'll poop out processed grass, which is, bullshit, in the sense of the word. Um, and so the cow pat or the bullshit will go back into the soil and then get reincorporated into the soil, into the microbes, and also into the grass roots. So that's a sort of little subcircle there. The methane that gets burped out will go up into the atmosphere. When it's in the atmosphere, it'll undergo a chemical change and it'll convert into moisture and carbon dioxide. Then that carbon dioxide goes back down through the process of synthesis, photosynthesis, gets turned into grass, trees, vegetative matter, and that cycle keeps going around and around and around. So cows aren't actually the problem in there. They're just part of the cycle that we have. And there's a finite amount of carbon. Now, there's another carbon source, which man found out probably 200 years ago, which is the slower cycle of carbon, which is where vegetative matter such as forests, trees, it can be grass as well, peat, goes into the earth and undergoes anaerobic breakdown and turns into something that we call crude oil. So there's massive supplies of crude oil that has all come from plant material at one point or another. And then we dig up this crude oil and we've found out a very effective way to make machinery go around and churn, and cars, and the whole industrial revolution was based on the fact that crude oil is combustible and we can create energy and motion out of that. So the problem is that we keep on adding to the intrinsic cycle, which is the one that I was talking about first with the cows and carbon dioxide and the grass going nicely around in the carbon cycle. The problem that we're having at the moment is that we keep on adding extra carbon into the system. So what was happening for a long time, everyone's pointing to the cows saying, hey, these guys are burping out methane. They're causing the problem. They weren't causing the problem. That was just a natural cycle of what it was. Everyone was just trying to get the heat off all the oil companies that were putting in fossil fuels into the system and overcharging the system. Now, most of the time, that carbon goes straight up into the atmosphere as carbon dioxide. Now, the most effective way that we can get that carbon dioxide back into the ground is, you guessed it, through plant growth and photosynthesis to turn it into grass. Now, how do we make the most amount of grass possible? Is have it growing and being consumed in a very active system, which is where we need the ruminants to come in and eat the grass and break it down so that we can get more of the carbon dioxide back into the ground from which it came from. So
back into the cycle.
Yeah, back into the cycle. So that's referred to as the extrinsic cycle of it coming through the fossil fuels and then adding the carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere through the process of combustion of engines. So in regenerative circles, they call crude oil yesterday's sunshine, because that literally came however many million years ago from carbon dioxide being incorporated into plants through the process of photosynthesis. So it is quite literally yesterday's sunshine. So they all talk about use today's sunshine, not yesterday's sunshine, which is solar, wind, all of these renewable energy sources, which, you know, if we're quick enough and if we have enough motivation, we can definitely arrest some of the disturbing trends that we're going with regards to water levels and temperatures.
Some of the wind farms now, which is concerning. I can't remember where the most recent one was. They're actually tearing them down, and there was a huge landfill full of all the wind turbines because they can't be recycled. So now they're just dumping all of these to just sit there. So again, a lot of the solutions, and it's the typical hubris of mankind, right? We think we can overcome nature. And so far, unfortunately, a lot of our attempts have not been that successful. I am hopeful that we can out innovate our problem. I hope, at least, if it doesn't come crashing down soon. But we have a good solution here, and the natural carbon cycle with the ruminants, we can see clearly provides a great way. And the thing with this is, not only is it a self-maintaining system, but with the regenerative farming, what we're seeing now is this carbon sequestration. So it's actually taking the carbon out of the atmosphere and putting it in the soil. So it's a carbon negative versus a positive. And this was shown recently, I think it was White Oak Pastures in the US. They did a study looking at a full life cycle analysis on their carbon footprint, and it was negative because of that carbon sequestration. So, we have a fantastic opportunity here, and I think people are misguided because of the narrative and because of people pushing their propaganda and agendas against cows with the ridiculous notion that cow farts and burps are the problem. And on the methane, and I'll give a shout out to Sacred Cow. This is where the infographic comes from. If no one has read Sacred Cow, highly recommend it. They did a documentary as well, but the book is much better. But they've got another infographic here, which I'll share, looking at the methane, this one here. And so, this is the total input. You can see on the far right, ag livestock, 3.9%. Cattle makes up 2% of the methane. And so this, still have to take into fact that there's a methane cycle with this. Meanwhile, cars, industry, planes, manufacturing, all of that stuff are the biggest producers of methane, and yet still somehow the common narrative we see in the media and in people talking about sustainability is we must address the cattle issue, which, if you're trying to fix a problem, you don't focus on the 2%, you focus on the 80 and 90%. So it's
You
strange.
focus on the 2% if you are the 80 or the 90%.
I suppose so. Yeah. If you have your own agenda that you want to maintain and you don't want to disrupt, your processes, which are heavily reliant on fossil fuels and everything else. But yeah, it's just, when you see the data, when you see the actual numbers and understand these cycles, I'm always surprised at how many people are still sort of blaming cattle for this issue. I think, again, I'm hopeful that, science and more information will come forward and we'll start to move in the right direction. But there is still the narrative, which, you and I, I'm sure, are both sort of fighting uphill against.
But the good thing is, the more information that comes out about this, the more people understand, the more that they can make the right choices with their dollars that they spend. And, the tides will change. I'm positive of that.
Absolutely. And that's probably a good point of closing things out. How can people go about doing that? We've obviously talked about, choosing where you're purchasing your food and being mindful and trying to think about people who are transparent. And I think a big part of that is really supporting the farmers. They are such a fundamental part of making sure we have a sustainable food supply to, keep us as a population on this planet. So I think people need to become more engaged with their farmers and connect with them more directly and more directly with their food overall. Because as we said, the more that people have that information, that connection, hopefully they start to make more informed choices that are more sustainable in nature.
And that's a key thing. Yeah, I'm a farmer myself, very small, but a farmer nonetheless. And that's what really drove me right at the start of Provenir is I wanted people to understand what I was doing on the land, what I was doing with my animals, that they could actually make a purchase from someone that they actually could identify and know where they are and understand the way that they're managing their land. So for a lot of people, that's really important for them. But that's why when Provenir started, we were so adamant that we had to have a technological solution to be able to connect those who are living in the city that don't have the opportunity to be directly connected with the farmer to actually understand where their purchases were going to and the farms in which we operate on, which we're really proud to tell their story and most of the farmers understand how vital they are in the whole food production. Well, no farmers, no food. It's as simple as that. And yet, we don't do a great job of really telling their story. So I think the more that we can connect the bridge between town and country, the better food choices will be made.
Absolutely. Yep. And nutrition ties into that as well. The more we connect with that, the better nutrition we'll have. There's a cascading effect of both environmental and economical downsides to an unhealthy population. So it all ties together. The better we are with our food, the better connected we are to our food, the more sustainable we are, the healthier we'll be. It all ties in. And so, it's an exciting space to be in. I think I'm glad that we're able to work with Provenir and get the best sort of quality food that we possibly can and push these narratives forward and try to get more information to people and share more about what our mission and our values are really about. And, there's some exciting stuff that's coming out now. There's good initiatives. There's things like Thankful for Farmers. Obviously, Meat and Livestock Australia is doing a lot to support the industry, but we want to see more and more people try to support with their own wallet and get the best for your own health as well. And I think the nose to tail approach, like we've talked about from an ancestral side, making sure nothing goes to waste, all of these things tie in to this overall mission that we want to support good, healthy people, but a sustainable future for the rest of us.
And so tell us what's on the cards for Vital Origin in 2024.
Yeah, well, obviously we've got lots of plans and lots of things we want to do. I think people hopefully get the idea from us both that we're quite passionate about pushing this forward and trying to get more awareness and more products out there that help support our mission to help support people. So we are working on some more products, different blends, different things where we can really make sure we're utilizing a nose to tail approach from the cattle and from the animals. So we want to start to utilize more of those items and doing a little bit of R&D on a couple other exciting projects and products that we might be able to bring to market as well. So again, both from our focus of nose to tail, but also high nutrient dense foods that support ancestral nutrition for everyone. So definitely want to keep an eye out over this next year. We'll hopefully have some exciting things coming out soon.
And if anyone has any questions, shoot them through to us. Would love to provide any more information, or if you have information as well that we've been talking about that you think that we'd be interested in learning a little bit more, because we're all learning. Please shoot them through on the platform that you're using, and we'll see that. And I think Richard, you were thinking about maybe doing a couple more podcasts and getting some different guests on the show.
Absolutely. Yep. There's a lot of exciting people in our space that I'd love to talk to. And there's more between farmers, doctors, everyone now getting involved in the space. So I'd definitely like to try to produce more podcasts and get more information out to our listeners and our followers and all of our customers. And everyone can, of course, follow us across all our channels as well. You can reach out to us on our socials. We are on Instagram predominantly as vital.origin. We've got our website, vitalorigin.com.au. Those are probably our main avenues now. And you can always reach out to us direct with questions via email at admin@vitalorigin.com.au. So we're always open to talking to people in the space and sharing more about our passions.
Well, thank you for the 6 podcasts, Richard. It's been great fun talking about what consumes our lives. And for me personally, to understand the nutritional side of what I do on a day-to-day basis has been super helpful.
And likewise, thank you for everything you're doing as the farmer, which we've laid out is one of the most important parts. And obviously, the supply of all of our products at Vital Origin. So very thankful for Provenir and yourself. And yeah, looking forward to the coming years working together.
Fantastic. Thanks, Richard.
Thanks, Rose. Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed the content, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes. And if you're looking to add in nature's most nutrient-dense foods back into your diet, be sure to check out vitalorigin.com.au and use coupon SOURCE10 at checkout for an extra 10% off. We'll see you guys on the next episode.